This first story initially caught my attention due to the interesting and slightly mysterious circumstances surrounding it. At around 6:30 am on the 14th of January 2024, a hot air balloon took off from Casa Grande, Arizona. The flight was operated by Dropline Hot Air Balloon Rides based in Arizona and Utah. However, this was not your usual hot air balloon ride. On board were 13 people, 4 passengers, 1 pilot, and, making the flight unique, 8 skydivers intending to jump from the basket once reaching altitude. The pilot was 37-year-old Cornelius van der Walt. He was described by those who knew him as a safety-minded pilot. Originally from South Africa, he was the owner and founder of Dropline Hot Air Balloon Rides. One of the passengers on board was 28-year-old Chayton Wishelak. His longtime girlfriend, Kinsey Taylor, was there too, as one of the 8 skydivers intending to jump. His actions later are an interesting point in this story. Another passenger was 28-year-old Katie Bartram of Fort Wayne, Indiana. Having recently graduated from nursing school, she worked at the Fort Wayne Lutheran Hospital on the advanced cardiac therapy floor. The other 2 regular passengers were 24-year-old Adahan Killicote and 23-year-old Valerie Stutterheim. The first 35 minutes of the flight were uneventful, with no doubt stunning views out over the arid desert landscapes of Arizona. After reaching an altitude of around 10,000 feet, it was here that the 8 skydivers would jump and leave the basket. This included Kinsey Taylor, whose boyfriend Chayton Wishelak would remain on board with the other 3 passengers and their pilot. However, when the skydivers had successfully jumped, things would begin to turn for the worst. According to eyewitness testimony, the balloon started quickly descending with a partly deflated envelope trailing above. The envelope of a hot air balloon is the large, lightweight fabric section above the basket. Although pilot Cornelius van der Walt attempted to slow their descent by pumping the burner, with a partly deflated envelope, it was of only little help. At around 7:45 am, the balloon and its 5 occupants, although landing upright, slammed into the desert floor near Sunshine Boulevard and Hannah Road in Eloy, Arizona. Although paramedics were quick to the scene, sadly, the severity of the impact meant that the pilot and 3 of his passengers either died on impact or shortly after. This was Caitlin Bartram, Adahan Killicote, and Chayton Wishelak. 23-year-old Valerie Stutterheim survived the crash, but suffered brain injuries and faced a long recovery. In the days following the accident, Rhonda Wishelak, mother of Chayton Wishelak, shared a heartbreaking text message her son had sent his girlfriend, Kinsey Taylor, when it became apparent they were going to crash. The text read, "This ain't gonna be good. I love you. Goodbye." Also, in the days following, the industry was rocked when a toxicology report from the pilot's autopsy led to this headline: "Could illegal substances have played a part?" The hot air balloon industry has come under focus for relaxed regulation and substance testing of pilots in the past. However, in this case, it was nothing more than an embarrassing blunder. An amended autopsy released a few days later revealed the substance had been given as part of life-saving efforts by paramedics. As I mentioned at the top of the story, this one caught my attention due to the unique circumstances surrounding it. How the envelope deflated after the skydivers left the basket, the heartbreaking text message on the way down, and the mystery that persists as to the cause of the accident. The NTSB's preliminary report noted thermal damage near the mouth of the envelope, frayed sawn rim tape near the top, and several damaged panels. However, it stopped short of linking these issues directly to the accident. A statement to the media stated an unspecified problem with the envelope may have caused the crash, but they found no mechanical anomalies. This is definitely a story I'd like to do a full video on in the future when more information comes to light. Now, I have a very special guest to tell you about the next story, one of my favorite YouTubers, and for many of you, I'm sure he needs no introduction.
These photos were captured before a hot air balloon ride in Egypt, a hot air balloon ride that would end up becoming one of the deadliest in history. At around 6:15 am on the 26th of February 2013, a hot air balloon, registration SU-283, took off from Luxor, Egypt, around 317 miles south of Cairo. It was operated by Sky Cruise, and the pilot was 29-year-old Momin Murad. For the 20 tourists on board, it was to be the highlight of their holiday. Against the backdrop of the rising sun, they'd experience a morning flight over the Valley of the Kings. Hot air balloons are, indeed, among the most popular activities in Egypt. Providing aerial views of the Nile River, the Temple of Karnak, and the Valley of the King, the hot air balloons over Luxor carry more than 200,000 tourists annually. However, the industry's safety in Egypt has come into question on several occasions. In 2009, 16 people were injured when a balloon crashed on landing. In 2011, the same balloon featured in this story was involved in another crash before being repaired and put back into service. More recently, 1 person died and 12 were injured after a crash in 2018. These accidents led to a host of legislation changes aimed at improving safety and the reputation of hot air ballooning in Egypt. However, much of this legislation was, in 2013, routinely ignored. At around 6:40 a.m., after a successful flight out over the desert and the monuments below, the captain of balloon SU-283 radioed his ground crew to inform them of his intended location for landing. Captain Murad lowered the balloon to 10 feet from the ground, and after throwing a drop line at his 10-man ground crew, the balloon was secured, or so everyone thought. At that moment, however, the basket, still 10 feet from the ground, was suddenly engulfed with flames. Captain Murad, who found himself on fire, along with British tourist Michael Rennie, climbed over the side and leapt out of the basket. Michael's wife, Yvonne, and 19 others remained on board without a pilot. As some of the ground crew ran to the captain's aid, hot air from the flame continued to fill the balloon. For the few ground crew still holding the ropes, the upward force became too much, and one by one, they lost their grip. This was a death sentence for the remaining 19 on board the balloon. Now, completely out of control, the balloon climbed steeply into the sky. Onlookers watched in horror as people began jumping over the side to escape the fire. However, at such a height, they had no chance of surviving. At around 980 feet off the ground, the damage caused by the fire to the balloon's envelope meant it could no longer sustain flight and began spiraling toward the ground. Almost 2 minutes after the accident began, hot air balloon SU-283 plummeted into a cane field west of Luxor. No one except the initial 2 who had jumped from the basket survived the accident. In the aftermath of the accident, investigators found evidence to suggest the cause of the fire was a fuel leak in a hose connected to the burner. The hose had been in use since 2005 and had accumulated extraordinarily high flight hours. The Egyptian Civil Aviation Authority released its final report on January 7, 2014. The 219-page report blamed a leak in a fuel line connected to the burner. The aging line sprung a leak, which ignited as the balloon came in to land. In response to the findings, Luxor's first prosecutor, Mohammed Fahmy, laid the blame on the pilot, making the following statement. The pilot and the maintenance engineer did not make necessary technical checks before taking off. Captain Murad, who denied wrongdoing, insisted his pre-departure checklist didn't require him to check the area of the hose where the fire started. Information regarding whether the captain, the maintenance engineer, or the balloon operator Sky Cruise faced any formal punishment remains unclear.
At around 6:30 p.m. on the 24th of August 2007, 12 passengers gathered at Langley Regional Airport, eagerly awaiting what promised to be a scenic and memorable hot air balloon ride out over the rugged landscapes of British Columbia in Canada. Among the guests that day was 49-year-old Shannon Nackstead. Soon to turn 50, the flight was an early birthday gift. Accompanying her was her husband of 31 years, August, and their 2 adult daughters, 28-year-old Justine and 21-year-old Gemma. Piloting the day's flight was Stephen Pennick, owner-operator of SRP Adventure Tours. His balloon was an Aerostar S-77A, although manufactured initially with 2 burners for lift and 3 propane cylinders in the basket. He had modified it to 3 burners to carry more passengers. Although this change was approved by the manufacturer, other modifications that had been made would come under the spotlight later. Once the briefing was completed, the pilot and the ground crew transported the passengers to the launch site near the Hazelmere trailer park in Surrey. At around 7 AM, once preparations were complete, everybody climbed inside the basket. This was pilot Stephen Pennock and the 12 passengers. Connecting the line from one of the propane cylinders to the balloon's burner, Pennock opened the valve and pulled the handle for a short test burn. Suddenly, a loud pop, followed by a hissing and a loud boom, caught everyone by surprise. Moments later, a giant ball of flames erupted inside the basket. Pilot Pennock suffered severe burns, evacuated the basket, and urged his passengers to do the same. He claimed he was knocked out of the basket and could not return due to the flames. Whatever the reason, he did not, or could not, pull the emergency vent that would have deflated the balloon, keeping it on the ground. As passengers jumped, the lighter basket, combined with the heat from the fire filling the envelope, caused the balloon to climb with several people still on board. Reaching the end of the 30-foot nylon strap, it's seen here lifting the trailer off the ground to which it was connected. Those who jumped from this height suffered more severe injuries, some landing on the truck connected to the trailer. Shockingly though, Shannon Naxted and her daughter Gemma were still inside the burning basket. The nightmare would only worsen when the nylon strap suddenly snapped, releasing the balloon in its burning basket with the 2 women still inside. After climbing several more feet, the envelope deflated, sending the balloon in the basket crashing into the RV park below. On the ground at the Hazelmere RV park, the chaos was far from over. 3 motorhomes were destroyed, having caught fire, along with several other vehicles. Sadly though, the real tragedy was about to be confirmed. 49-year-old Shannon Naxted and her 21-year-old daughter Gemma, both having never left the basket, were unfortunately found dead. The investigation into the accident was handled by the Canadian Transportation Safety Board. While examining the charred wreckage, investigators found that only one of the balloon's 4 propane cylinders had its valve open. This meant it was the one in use. Additionally, its fuel line that ran to the burner had been dislodged. Investigators concluded that the pop and the sounds heard by the pilot and ground crew were due to the fuel line disconnecting from its socket, causing pressurized propane to escape. They believe that when the pilot performed the test burn, it ignited and released the propane. As mentioned at the start of the video, the Aerostar S-77A had been manufactured with 2 burners and 3 propane cylinders. As allowed by the manufacturer, the operator, SRP Adventure Tours, had modified it to 3 burners to carry more passengers. However, along with the extra burner, a 4th propane cylinder had been added too. This was the cylinder in use at the time of the accident. This upgrade was not approved by the manufacturer nor by Transport Canada, who regulate the industry. Interviews with the pilot revealed that, unlike the 3 standard propane tanks whose fuel lines were routed along the basket uprights and placed inside a leather sleeve to minimize stresses, the number 4 cylinder was connected and disconnected for each flight, and its fuel line was coiled around itself when not in use. Investigators believed that the additional stress caused by the constant disconnection and the coiling of the fuel line was likely the reason it came free. Even more disturbingly, unlike the other 3, it had no emergency cutoff valve. The pilot would need to turn the nozzle 5.5 times to shut off the propane. As this didn't happen, loose propane continued to fuel the fire throughout the entire ordeal. Although the propane fire breaking out in the basket was the underlying cause behind the tragedy, the Transportation Safety Board noted that the catastrophe was made worse by the lack of the emergency fuel shutoff valve and the pilot not venting the balloon to deflate it before exiting the basket. In fairness, it must be noted that, although the Transportation Safety Board's final report states The pilot evacuated without deflating it. He himself maintains he was knocked out of the basket by the fire and was unable to re-enter. That's all the stories for today's video. A big thanks to my special guest, Fascinating Horror. If you haven't already, check out his channel, there's a link in the description. If you found value in today's video, I'd love it if you subscribed and joined me for the next one. To watch another one of my hot air balloon disasters, click a link on screen. And as always, thanks for watching.